2020 quarantines have been a very interesting time in my life, and they brought about a few annoyances. But some of the more positive aspects that they've brought are the media I've been consuming. I've seen new movies, shows, and read different books, and one of them was one recommended by my class. Alison Bechdel's Fun Home is a graphic novel published in 2006 that documents her life and her father's lives, how they intertwine, and how they relate to both of their sexualities, as there's a bit more than meets the eye to her father. He turns out to have been gay, even though she and the rest of her family didn't necessarily know that for their whole lives, though her mom did, apparently. And he had been having these episodes or these instances where he would get with his students, being an English teacher, and she is more or less reconstructing how she understands him so many years after the fact. And I think that book was really interesting, but I really want to talk about how it emotionally resonated with me as I read it. Fun Home resonated with me in more ways than I was prepared for. There are many circumstances Bechdel introduces at the start of the book, i.e. the context of her life, that bear no resemblance to mine. I'm not gay and my parents are not gay. In fact, up until as recent as these last few years, my mother was extremely homophobic and did not believe in homosexuality. I did not grow up in a small town with little exposure to the outside world, and my parents did not either. My mother was born and raised in Mississippi before moving to Syracuse, New York at the age of 5. Her family went on many road trips across the country where other parts of her family live. My dad was the son of a Congolese diplomat who traveled the world, and he did not grow up in the United States or even in one specific place. I barely read a single one of my parents' literary recommendations until college. My mom read to me as a child for a long time, but I relied on this too much and never cared to read myself. My father tried many times to make this connection, but I was steadfast against the practice of reading for fun, so I did not even consider it. There was never a chance he could have Trojan horsed me like Bechdel's father did with the works of Collet. Finally, my parents are not teachers or artists, they are scientists. Despite all the reasons Bechdel and myself were starkly dissimilar, through her writing she connected with me emotionally in ways that most writers never have. On page 83, Bechdel talks about how her mom's Catholicism is more form than content, but the idea of sacrifice was still a major concept to her mom. Growing up in a devoutly Christian setting, I immediately recognized this. The concept of sacrifice in Christianity is exalted, and self-sacrifice is perhaps the greatest good one could do. This most relevantly relates to Jesus of Nazareth, but as a kid, it is hard not to adopt this principle throughout all areas of your life. The continued reinforcement of this logic is where form supersedes content, i.e. the dissociation of that sacrificial act from the story of Christ and its application in one's own life in the common religious claim that one should be Christ-like. The book never directly addresses why Bechdel's mom stays with her dad, but I immediately felt that this was the reason. For a long time in my life, perhaps until 2 or 3 years ago, this glorification of sacrifice was a core value for me. This type of martyrdom only breeds resentment for whoever it is you think you are helping. To truly help anyone, there has to be a genuine desire to do so. I do not know if Bechdel's mom stayed with her dad out of this feeling of duty to him or to her family as a whole. I suspect it was for Bechdel's father because that resentment early on was so tangible, but that could have been for many other legitimate reasons. When I read that and reconsidered the mom in the relation to the family, I didn't just understand it, but I felt it. Pages 93 and 95 feature Bechdel's adolescent thoughts on how she perceived her father's lack of masculinity. The close association to flowers, a traditionally feminine symbol, ran in contrast to masculine imagery from other men or on TV that she admired. My mother is a tomboy in every way except her appearance, in either stunning lack of self-awareness or just self-exceptionalism. My mother reinforced traditional masculine gender roles with me. boys don't ride pink bikes, fathers do yard work and mothers cook and clean, and men are aggressive when protecting what's important, especially their women. Many times she would tell me, "Don't let them talk about your mama, boy." This is not even including the natural gender construction from school, media, and peers that happens in most childhood. I just also had a direct pipeline to this through my mom. My father did not live up to that ideal. He never tried. He was quiet, bookish, thoughtful, and non-competitive, and non-confrontational in every sense of the term. He did perform manual tasks like yard work, but he only did this because my mom would not. He was vocal in his distaste of it and frequently mentioned that he preferred hiring someone else to do it. As for aggressiveness, he would not even kill bugs, nor would he tolerate my sister or I killed them. Special's description of her father as a sissy, while incredibly relatable, may not even touch on the depths of my disappointment as a child. Yet I would never have thought I shared this much mentally with someone so different like Bechtel, because it was part of a masculine image I was trying to cultivate as a child. More on that later. Compounding these instances where Bechtel reached through space and time, connecting her younger self with my younger self, was a range of pages. From pages 95 to 99, Bechtel explores how in her childhood she had not only begun to gravitate towards masculine gender expression, but how this clashed with her family. Though this clashing only strengthened her resolve, her expression primarily manifested in her appearance, but other examples included playing sports and her nickname Butch. Only Bechtel can know how consciously she made these decisions. As one can figure from the other two examples, I engaged in feminine gender expression at a similar stage in my life. The difference between this example and those, and why this moment really grabbed me, is because it was done so unconsciously. From birth to early high school, and much like my mother, I was extremely homophobic. I was Christian, then became Catholic, but most importantly, I was a mama's boy. If my mother did not like it, I didn't like it. Growing up African American, with both my parents having constantly informed me of what that means, I could never find in my heart to hate someone without knowing them. Thus, my homophobia manifested itself not through hate, but through anxiety of being gay, anxiety with mere association of homosexuality, anxiety with others' misinterpretation of me being gay. This anxiety caused me to disassociate from anything that was suggested to be gay, including things I enjoyed. Consequently, as a part of my adolescent understanding of male homosexuality, was that guys that acted like girls or did things like girls did were gay. In turn, I very consciously avoided things that I identified being for girls. After Bechtel hit on 2 successive personal connections, originally reflecting on this segment was actually the first time I realized how many times I gender bent as a kid and how many times I wanted to do this but was afraid of confronting what that meant. Bechtel may have clashed with her parents, but my conflict was primarily with myself. At age 5 to 8, I idolized my mom, so when she was not home, I would walk in her heels. I did remember doing this for a long time, but I never looked into it. I wrote it off as childish reverence for my mom. At around ages 10 to 12, my sister and I watched a Little Richard biopic where they stated he wore Pancake 31, a type of makeup which was something I wanted to try for a really long time. In the Foucauldian tradition of self-policing, I completely repressed these thoughts knowing makeup was for girls. Honestly, I was severely jealous of girls' ability to wear makeup without criticism, as puberty was turning me into a pizza face. At least that's how I felt. I actually didn't have much acne as a kid. From age 11 and on, I developed a deep desire to have at least shoulder-length hair. This came from many rom-coms or female-based sitcoms that my mother and sister watched. The female lead could be white, black, Asian, Hispanic, tall, short, rich, or poor, but she was always pretty. The guy could be ugly, he could even be or just alright. The most common thread between the female leads, pretty hair. After seeing Larenz Tate with his long hair as O-Dog in Menace to Society, or Ice Cube do the same as a Doughboy in Boys in the Hood, I felt comfortable expressing this actively. if these hypermasculine gangsters could have long hair, I could have long hair. That was despite me still associating the look more with Erica Alexander as Maxine Shaw and Living Single. At age 13, I was a huge Baltimore Ravens fan. I saw a video of Ravens legends Ray Lewis wearing a crop top jersey in college. I wanted to wear one, not just as football jersey either. Crop tops were for girls, especially off the football field. Even if I mustered up the courage to look past this, the Falcadian Tower in my mind would not have let me disassociate crop tops from Nick Swartzen's gay character Terry exclusively wearing crop tops in Reno 911. All the examples I use are from just one chapter of the book. It was at this point I was hooked. As I continued my first read through the book, it was hard not to wonder whether Reshto was just so good of a writer to connect that deeply with me, whether the two of us had more common than I may have realized, or whether book recommendations for class were always this good and I just never noticed. What I was not wondering, however, was why this book was assigned. I do not even remember what I originally thought the idea of assigning it was, but 3/4 deep into the book I had thought I figured it out. Then page 230 happened. I shouldn't pretend to know what my father was. Perhaps my eagerness to claim him as gay in the same way I'm gay, as opposed to bisexual or some other category, is just a way of keeping him to myself. This line hit like a truck. The book had been, in part, an exercise in Bechtel analyzing the construction of her father's and her own sexuality up to that point. Then, this one line changed everything. Bechtel was understanding and reconstructing her father's sexuality through her own, similarly to how he had with her and the Trojan horse, and how he later understood his through her. Taken more generally, people understand other sexualities, genders, and identities through their own, which would also mean the way that people understand their own sexualities, genders, and identities will work at least in part with how they understand it in others. Immediately I understood this line and listened because I was a part of the exercise as the reader. While Bechtel was trying to retroactively make sense of her father through herself, I was reading the book through the reflexive lens of academia and thus compelled to both understand and reconstruct my own sexuality, gender, and identity through Bechtel. As I just recreated this before in the video, the book is designed to accomplish this through layers of literary allusion to real life in its biographical nature. The literary allusions are certainly shorthand to understanding the characters and their situations, but also their repetition subtly influences the reader to do the same with their own lives in relation to the books. The biographical moment that Bechtel points to in the construction of herself can also serve as points of entry into one's own memory and then exploration. It seemed like she was understanding and connecting with me so clearly because I was understanding myself through her. She sees so much of herself in her father because she is using herself to understand him. Bechtel is not just letting the reader in on how she is discovering her father's journey and reliving her own journey, she's also inviting the reader to do the same and almost outright teaching them how. When a text makes you tap into your own emotions, it has made a deep personal connection. When a text makes you tap into your own emotions from the past that you may or may not have been actively aware of, I do not know a better compliment for an artwork. Being in a college class that promotes reflexivity, approaching said class with an eagerness despite knowing nothing about its department, having spent the past year working on my mental health, and spending my spring break alone with this book in Los Angeles, California, when a random quarantine canceled my week-long law school visiting plans, certainly helped make these self-revelations possible. Even with that myriad of almost cosmic circumstances occurring, without Fun Home, it does not all come together. This is also a fraction of what Fun Home taught me about myself.